What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the O Show podcast, presented by Mayweather Boxing and Fitness in Scottsdale. Mayweather Boxing and Fitness is an exclusive high-intensity fitness experience developed by the champ himself, Floyd Money Mayweather, formulated with the perfect combination of boxing, strength, and cardio conditioning intervals designed to make you look good, feel good, and leave you with more than just a great sweat. So head on down to Mayweather Boxing and Fitness in Scottsdale. Our guest today is a musician by day, kind of a spaceman by night, Jason Achilles Mezilis. Thanks for joining the show, man. We had a few technical difficulties to start, had about a 30-minute rain delay, but we're rocking and rolling, no pun intended.
Is Mayweather's like nickname Money? I never heard that before.
It's because he makes a lot of it.
Yeah. That's a good nickname.
He makes a lot of money. So
you just adopt that anyway, yeah.
What would your nickname be?
Not Money.
So I'm
maybe
very
Lucky.
Jason Achilles Lucky Mezilis.
Yeah, I don't know. I've got enough names already. I don't think anybody needs more of them.
So I'm very intrigued to talk to you today. Again, I listened to you on a podcast a few weeks ago, wanted to reach out. You are musician, rock and roll artist. You are, again, you just founded your own company, but you were a consultant for NASA for a number of years as well. When did that start? Just to get into this, like first, your desire and love for space, that happened at a young age, right? Like somewhere around like kindergarten, someone like a teacher came in and talked to you guys about space and you were just hooked and that fire was never, put out.
Yeah. I mean, it, probably the same age it does for everybody. I think the love was there, but that episode you mentioned with the teacher, who I'm actually still like now good friends with, which is amazing. But it was just sort of a seminal moment. I remember where it it just kind of congealed it, with a few other things. Like my folks took me to see a telescope when I was really young, and you could see, we went to see Jupiter, and it was like, somehow I remember this, it was like the size of a marble, and you could see the clouds on Jupiter and like looking through the eyepiece, it wasn't on a screen or anything. And then, like the first Star Trek movie, the motionless picture, I remember watching that in our neighbor's basement, and plus the music, the way the music was correlated in that film with the, was it Jerry Goldsmith that did that score?
Yeah, I believe you're right. Yep.
Because James Horner did the second, but both of those, and like that Klingon battle cruiser scene. Well, it's not even a battle; it's just V'ger annihilating those Klingons in the beginning with that static, and the mix of the special effects and the sound and the space, and it's just what's not to love,
Oh my God! I mean, so that obviously has to evolve into something else later on in your life, because I feel like a lot of people would be like, oh, cool, and then move on to the next thing at a young age, as many kids at a young age do. So what kept it going for you? You just wanted to learn more about it?
Nah, I don't know. I think I just have this like weird, I feel like, I don't know, maybe I have an overactive imagination. I guess I just it never got drilled into my head, the idea that like, things that you dream about can't just be, real eventually.
So did you have like a set like goal in mind when it kind of clicked for you?
Oh, you mean as far as like how the working in space kind of came back?
Yeah.
It was, it wasn't until, so I got the gig, I got the gig with NASA as a consultant, which is actually, I had to start the company in order to get the gig. And, which then led to, now that photo is from, now we're working on a new project that my company is now leading, which is cool because our contract is over now with JPL because we basically did the job. Mm-hmm. And so at the time it was just a company formed to get the contract,
Right.
But now we're actually leading a new project and we've got funding from NASA, and it's really pretty cool. I don't know. It was just kind of like in the sort of previous years leading up to that, I just kind of, I don't know, you get to a point in your life and you're like, I don't know. It just sort of felt there was just this need that started developing. I don't really know how better to explain it.
So what were some of the things, post that you talked about, like your parents bringing you places, obviously school as well. Because you didn't really get into music until like your senior year in high school? Like that was kind of like a late blend for you when it came to the music side.
Well, that was when I decided to do it professionally. So probably that was an early start to figure out what you wanted to do with your life. Because a lot of people finish college and they're still kind of like, I don't know, I got a psychology degree because I couldn't figure it out,
Yeah.
But basically, when I was 17 years old, I think that's when I decided, okay, I'm gonna get a degree in music, and sort of, I guess that kind of cemented that as a professional move.
Yeah. I mean, that's
which is
very
funny because
interesting.
a music degree is virtually worthless in at least my line of work. I mean, it's good if you want to be a teacher, or a researcher. I have a cousin in London, one of my Greek cousins who does fantastic theoretical research on music and psychological effects of these things, and in his line of work, a degree is helpful. With mine, I think just having a bachelor's degree of any sort, I think that might have been a requirement when I got the NASA gig, but they didn't care what it was.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, obviously, how much does a music degree reinforce your work in the space? But I guess in my case, it sort of was helpful. But
so kind of talk about,
a little fragmented, sorry.
I mean, I'm very interested to get your take on how you made music, like, quote unquote, a career as opposed to just doing it for fun. Because the goal is to do it for fun, but at the same time, there's the business aspect. And, you getting a music degree, did you learn any of that in that degree? Or was it more of just, like you said, like having that to do other things, like becoming a teacher, helping, the younger generation? Like, when it comes to the business side, like financially, being a musician, how quickly or how long did it take you to kind of put those pieces together?
I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm horrible at that stuff. And it's weird because music has always been very personal for me. And I think it's been harder to divest myself from the, I guess you would say, the artistic side of it into the financial side. And like, you kind of like, you really need to think of yourself as a commodity. And so like, it was only the last couple of years that I started, I guess, like a solo career, where I'm touring now as a solo instrumentalist. It's just me and a drummer, and we tour as Jason Achilles. And one of the reasons for dropping my last name from that was, well, one, so people would remember it, because
right,
well, it's a little easier to digest. But also, it was our first tour of Europe in 2018, where we sort of experimented with that, like just saying that, and then would people remember the band, as opposed to when I would say my full name and they would just kind of give a blank stare. But also it helps divest yourself from the project, so you can think of yourself more like a cereal box or something. Whereas with the company now, it's because it's like so obviously a separate entity. I think I'm learning a lot more about the financials of things just in the last 6 months. I mean, we just got our first contract for this new project 6 months ago, and I have to do all these purchase orders and invoicing with all my providers, and we've got a merchandise line that we're just now getting going. I've got an assistant now working with me. We got the website up and running, Zandef, Deksit, which again nobody can pronounce, but what are you gonna do? But when somebody tells me they're interested in music, like young, one of the first things I tell them, which they think is a joke, I say, sign your kid up for financial planning classes. And it's not a joke. It's because if you want to do what you love, you have to figure out a way to afford to do it, unless you're independently wealthy or something, But for the rest of us, you got to find a way to afford to be a musician. And nowadays, there's a lot of strange ways to monetize in music, but I think it's become easier for the artist to control how they monetize directly, but it's been increasingly difficult for you to monetize while creating what I think would be considered actually artistic.
Right.
Like if you're doing sort of like, TikTok or Instagram kind of snippets, tastes of stuff, there's ways to get money at that, and YouTubers obviously, well, YouTube actually can monetize directly, but if you're trying to sell like Led Zeppelin length music and in this like long format, like a lot of our songs are like 6.5 minutes long. I have not figured out how to do that yet. And there's things like licensing for film, but I had a pretty bad experience with that. So now I'm pretty shy about that stuff. So I have not honestly figured out how to monetize with it. I think right now as we're coming out of pandemic, everyone's, setting up tours again. And that's definitely a good way,
Oh yeah.
like my drummer and I, we love playing live. So right now we're looking for a good situation with a booking agent where we can really get moving.
So do you juggle
yeah.
both, or is it kind of like, all right, if I'm focused on music, I'm all in with, touring, booking stuff, everything when it comes to that, whether it's the music and the business side, or, your company when it comes to, dealing with, getting audio on Mars, which I think is like the number one thing that you guys were working on. Do you juggle both, or is it, again, I'm all in on one thing or the other?
It's interesting. A lot of people have asked me if I had to, sacrifice one for the other. What I do is, no, it's all in on both, but I really try and be all in for the moment. So
Yeah.
when we're doing the music, it's focused. When we're doing the space stuff, it's focused, but it can be, morning doing one, afternoon doing another, like last night. So I have a studio that's separate from my house where I live. This isn't it. This is just like a little home studio here, but I've got a space downtown LA, and I'll go down there, leave the phone in the car.
Mm-hmm.
Right now I have to learn a bunch of songs for this just little independent film project I'm doing. And so just, go in there, lock yourself away for hours. Don't think about anything. And also that I tend to work hours at night where nobody's bothering me, and then the space stuff tends to happen earlier in the day when I'm not really musically worthwhile. So it's funny because I say music by day, space by night, but It's probably the opposite. It's just music is still, I consider, my primary first, because that's what I've been doing for decades, and the space stuff is new. But they're definitely both of equal importance. There's been periods of time over the last 5 years where one has taken precedence and the other fell off, and I never enjoyed that. I've discovered that for me, I have to have them both going, but it's like it's like any kind of relationship, right? You got to make sure you give things the right focus or they're going to suffer, and then you suffer.
So trying to balance both of these at the same time, I'm curious to know from both space perspective and music perspective, what were the lowest moments that you got in each where you said this could be it? Like the closest you ever came to quitting because it got too difficult, and then obviously the uprise and overcoming that.
I don't think I ever came close to quitting. I've definitely come where like I felt like there was no hope.
Yeah.
It wasn't quitting. It was sort of like watching it fall apart and not wanting to. So, okay, probably. So when I first got hired at JPL, it was beginning of 2017. And within a span of 6 months, I started this new career as an instrumentalist, which was awesome. I went to Europe and recorded my first fully orchestral piece, hired an orchestra, did the whole thing, which is something I'd been dreaming about forever. Mm-hmm. And I started working from NASA, and it was incredible. And then within like 4 months, all of those things fell off. Like we finished our first contract with NASA, and then there was this gap of time where they were like, okay, thanks. And I'm like, is that it? Is my space career done? Like it lasted 2 months and it's over. And I got really down. And then, we finished off a tour, I think, with my band, and like there was a lull there. The orchestral thing was done, but like I put it out and like sold 40 copies after spending, thousands of dollars. And like, so I think that's the lowest moment in recent memory, where like to have everything you've dreamed of, all three things, and then have it all sort of just evaporate.
Yep.
And just like, shit.
I mean, it becomes a realization that you actually have to like overcome things and really put in the work to keep them going.
Well, it's sort of like you see it all vaporize, and you're like, then you're like, damn it, was I just lucky to even get there in the first place? Is that it? Am I not going to be able to touch this again? And so, yeah, I definitely, then there was a lot of sort of despairing months of like, how do I not even recapture, but like create some new situation that fires all those things again? Because I don't know. It's I don't know. I think it's always harder when you know what you're missing, right? As opposed to just some pie in the sky.
Oh yeah. What were some of those inspirations for you then? Like even at a young age when it came to the music side and then obviously your working side, being a consultant for NASA for 4 or 5 years, starting your own thing, you know, developing different things to accomplish the things that you wanted to do. Who were some outside inspirations that kind of like told you, even if it was for like a moment, maybe like it inspired you, gave you a why for a little bit to keep going, be like, oh, that's awesome. I could take that and kind of mish that into my own style in a sense.
Wait, are you asking like direct inspiration, like folks that interacted with me, or like
Just people that you saw, like if you saw them on TV, whatever, people you interacted with, anybody.
Well, because like, I mean, as far as interacting, my parents have always been amazing. I mean, even to not argue about me getting a music degree is,
Yeah.
I'm not saying they were necessarily always thrilled with the choices, but ultimately they were supportive. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Now it's obviously worked out better. So, but as far as like, yeah, like when I was young, I remember like I really wanted to play piano because I'd seen an early broadcast of a legendary pianist named Vladimir Horowitz.
Mm-hmm.
At a young age, and he just had huge hands. It was, you know, like that's awesome. I remember watching the Cosmos series that Carl Sagan had, you know, way back in the day, and his just the sound of his voice. It's weird because looking back now, I realize sound was kind of intertwined with it a lot. My kindergarten teacher, like, he had a really awesome voice. And I forgot about that until we reconnected a few years ago. And as soon as he opened his mouth, I was like, oh my God, I feel like I'm a kid again. And like, there's something about these, like, you know, when people, I don't know, how you deliver something is, I think, is important is what's there in terms of if it's going to inspire people, you know what I mean? Which is something I'm really trying to do with this new company. You know, it's like we're all this stuff we're trying to do with space is trying, you know, like the sounds of Mars, for example, right? It wasn't just capture the sounds of Mars. It was like really capture them well, you know, make it sound good. And our mic, and that's why one of the reasons that the selection that we made for the hardware that ultimately flew, we wanted to make sure, yeah, it's going to work, but also we wanted it to actually sound good.
Right.
And it does. It sounds amazing. And so I don't know. I guess I'm not sure if that answers your question or not.
No, I mean, it totally does, because like I'm constantly looking at other inspiration to keep me going in what I'm doing, because I'm always taking bits and pieces from other fractions, other people, and kind of meshing it into my own thing with my own style that I know that I have, in order to, again, keep me going and keep being curious about things and keep being interested in outside things. Because, again, like when I saw your interview on that podcast, I'm like, this is very interesting and something that I've never seen before. Someone who is literally just black and white, music and space. Like, you are probably one of the only people, at least, you know, out there that people know of that have those similarities.
Well, there's a lot. I've met a lot of people since I've gotten involved here, you know, that in the space world that do music. There's a lot of musicians that, like, a lot of surprisingly creative types from play, and you wouldn't expect. But right. I think, yeah, the unique part probably is that a lot of people don't try and focus on them both, you know. And I just don't sleep much. I think, and I don't have, you know, I don't have kids,
right?
You know, as far as I know. But like what you just said about, like, you know, finding your style is interesting, right?
Yep.
Like you don't even realize that sometimes you don't know what your style is until you're thrown off the deep end. It's like your swimming style. You don't really know until somebody pushes you in.
Exactly.
And then you're like, I mean, you know, that's a rough analogy, but you know what I mean? Like, finding your style is interesting because, like, you can't just say, okay, this is my style. You have to do the thing. You know, you have to speak the language, and then you start to realize what your accent is, right?
Yeah.
And then if you maybe want to affect that as you go, or if you want to affect your style, or like, then you can start to see, like, your show, you know, you start doing your show, but then it takes a while. You get feedback from people, and then you watch a couple episodes and you're like, I look like a dick, or, oh, that's cool. Or, you know, or this microphone sucks, or, you know, all these things that will affect the style of how you present yourself, you know?
Correct.
And it's fun to see that come together. and occasionally you get to see yourself from a removed perspective, and but yeah, it's fun to discover whether or not you actually have style. That's I've never considered myself a stylish person, but I'm starting to notice, mostly from feedback of other people, there's a certain way, I guess, that I tend to approach things. That's cool. Yeah, it's neat.
Do you remember some of the first songs you wrote, thinking back and thinking like, holy shit, that is awful?
I used to have the opposite problem where I used to think everything I came up with was amazing. And maybe it wasn't. And then I wasn't critical enough of it, So for me, it was kind of the opposite problem.
Like in the moment, yeah, like you think like, because you haven't done anything beyond that point. Like, oh, that's awesome, I'm going to put that out there. But then you look back 3-4 years later, maybe even like 6 months later and think like, probably shouldn't have done that.
I would say more than songwriting. Well, I've never written lyrics, but so some people say it's not songwriting if there aren't lyrics, but I do words, not words. I do melodies and everything except lyrics, But I always, if there's ever a lyrical situation, I have to work with, a singer. But as far as melodies, music, no, I think I've looked back with some regret on recordings I've done in terms of just the quality of the recordings, but not as much about the songs. It's more about like just the way I was captured, and I've always been a much better producer than I've been an engineer. And when you're engineering your own stuff, it's hard to get a remote perspective. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think it's better now. Because anyway, yeah.
So who's, because this is very interesting to me, and the whole concept of it. Whose idea was it to, again, start it from NASA's standpoint of putting sound on Mars, building something to shoot up there and put, audio on Mars? Because, again, you're dealing with a ton of audio stuff on the music side as a musician, and then you bring that over to your other gig, and it's like this insanely cool thing that nobody's ever done before.
So the idea was brought up over 20 years ago by Carl Sagan, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was not the one who originally thought of it. It was one of his, I forget the name. Anyway, but he took the idea. He sort of, I guess, first popularized it. He wrote NASA about it. He's like, hey, we should really do this. And then he died right after that. Mm-hmm. And then, but when I first thought of it, I didn't know about any of that stuff. So it was kind of, it was like, you get an idea that sort of independently comes to you and you think, oh, how clever I am. And then you go online and you're like, oh, yeah, people have been doing this for decades. Yeah. But as far as this mission itself, yeah, I was sort of like, I had the idea and then I was like, oh man, there's got to be a way to convince them to do this. And then a few months into that process, a friend of mine told me, hey, actually they're going to do it. And then it was like, oh crap. Okay. Yeah. How do I get on board? How do I get that job? So it was sort of a very focused effort that had to like rapidly shift from how do you convince everybody to like, oh crap, they're going to do it without me,
Right.
And the way it timed out, and there's a lot of luck and a lot of research. I don't know. It was kind of everything combined. But.
So when you first, were introduced to the idea, start to finish, how long did it all take? How long did it all evolve?
So I was on tour. It was like October of 2016. That's when I had my first meeting with Dave Gruhl, who eventually became my supervisor at JPL. A month prior to that, I'd written NASA a letter, like, hey, I'd like to be involved. And they actually wrote right back. And they're like, yeah, cool. Really? And so they said, we'll get in touch with you in a month. And then they did. And then, but then I had to start my own company because they couldn't hire me. And so, and I was on tour with this website called LegalZoom. Mm-hmm. I don't know if maybe but they're actually, it's a very useful tool if you need to do things like set up a company really quick. And, it's a few bucks. Mm-hmm. You got to avoid all the like stuff they try and throw at you, Right. They were great. And so we set up an S Corp and then got hired beginning of 2017. And then basically our first contract was 2 months long. And so I had to put together a technical team, and we basically had to write this big, it was like an evaluation study, basically. It was like a 20-page report. We had to give an in-person review at JPL, which was interesting. And so that was the initial contract. And then came that dark period I mentioned before where I was like, oh, crap. Yeah. Then 4 months later, they were like, all right, your first proposal was fine, but we just can't afford to do any of that stuff. So we're going to bring you back and help us select an off-the-shelf component, help us develop the test procedures, run some tests on your own, blah, blah, blah. And so that contract ran through right up until the day of the press conference this year, which was February 22nd, which is when they first shared that sound that we got. And very subtly slid through the fact that we didn't actually capture the whole landing sequence, which is, but Dave, our supervisor, was able to fire the mic back up over the weekend and make sure. And so it was good. It worked. It didn't capture what it was supposed to, but it wasn't the fault of the hardware, and everything worked fine. So ultimately.
So everybody was happy in the end. That's all that matters.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, Dave was really good about keeping everybody's expectations really low.
Yeah.
And it's funny. Yeah. Normally, everybody kind of forgets that was the whole goal, was to capture that landing sequence. But it was funny. I was having drinks the other day with some folks from SpaceX. And one of the guys, I met him, he's this young engineer over there. And he's like, what do you do? And I was like, well, I did this thing, He's like, oh yeah, too bad that didn't work. Oh my God, you son of a bitch. Those guys, they're very, very detail oriented, those guys.
Oh my God.
But usually everybody's like, oh, it's so awesome. And of course the SpaceX guys are like, yeah, nice job there.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But at the same time, they're also like, everybody there is like, their whole thing is they want to send stuff to Mars. So at the same time as he was kind of giving me shit, he was also like, oh man, that's so cool. It was fun. It was definitely worth the beer.
I mean, you guys have worked on like a ton of cool projects. Some of the stuff that you sent me, what was the Delta IV rocket ship that you guys sent up?
Yeah, you should. Yeah, if you can share that with people, or if there's, so that was just a fun project we did. Buddy of mine at JPL set up the camera, and then the audio. Yeah, that you really need to like. People need to hear. Really, the standout on this is the audio.
Yeah. And, well, commentate on it for us.
Yeah, so basically we're about 750 feet away from the pad. We had to set the camera and the microphones up the day before.
Wow.
It took about 6 months of planning, working through the logistics of it, meeting the right people. It was really one of those, like, the right person can say yes or no.
Right.
But the whole reason that this happened, the only reason I set this whole project up was because one of the perks of this, Mars audio gig is that I got to get a private tour of Skywalker Sound.
Ooh.
Up in Marin County, I want to say it was like early 2019. And while I was there, I met this kid named Benny Burt. And people might recognize his name because his father, who was same name, Ben Burt, was the sound designer for Star Wars. And I mean, it's everything. He's the godfather of sound design. And his son Benny also works there and does a lot of sound editing.
Yeah.
And I had seen something he had done earlier in the space world. So I actually knew his son because of his work. And so when I met him, I'm like, oh man, you did this one audio thing with a space shuttle microphone. And it was killer. He's like, oh, thanks. And he's like, I've always wanted to like record a rocket launch, but for reals, like actually, for me. And I'm like, all right, I want to make this happen. Yeah. So it was a long time coming, but about 6 months of actual planning. And finally, there we were. It was myself. I didn't even really need to be there at that point. I was just like, it's like you organize the party and then you just sit back and enjoy it. And then my friend from JPL, Justin, who filmed that video, and then Benny, who did the audio. And we made sure, the reason we kept it as a simple one shot is we wanted people to experience as much as close as possible what it would be like to be there. I mean, you can't be within 3 miles of launch, and this might, everything, like I said, we're less than 1,000 feet away. And the microphones are at a different location, but same distance, because the way we had to put it where it wasn't going to get like wind noise and weird acoustic reflections. So the camera's dead center, with that crazy wide angle, and the microphones are off to the side, but at the same distance. And they like, and his dad came with us, just so they made a father-son road trip out of it. And, and I'm of course trying not to totally nerd out on the fact that, he's like, yeah, I brought one of the microphones they brought, because his father was like kind of helping out, but really kind of staying out of the way, let his son, really do the thing, and Benny's very talented and had all these, you have to do these remote triggers and stuff. It's really complicated stuff, especially if you've never done it before.
Yeah.
Well, one of the microphones they brought was the same microphone they used to record the Millennium Falcon sounds.
Wow.
I'm like, okay, this is ridiculous. There's actually a cool home movie video that was put together, but I don't know if we can ever put it out because there's a lot of things on there that are not cleared for public release.
What kind of things, Jason?
Yeah. Well, it was funny because the rocket was a spy satellite. And so the payload was fully secure. There was no issue there. But the problem was that, like, the weekend of the launch, all this top brass started rolling in. And so we had to really, like, stay out of people's way, because anybody at any time could have been like, take your crap, get out of here.
Yeah.
So we really had to keep a low profile, and fortunately there was no problems. We had a friend who works there who really, he had I don't know. It's just really cool. I love, people can check it out. We have my company, Zandef Deksit. We have a YouTube now, and that video's on there. And it's you got to listen with the headphones though. It's insane. I think the rocket launch, I think somebody said it measures at the launch point, it measures like 152 decibels, which is, physically punishing. Wow. So where we were at, even from that far distance, it's still pretty damn loud. Most launches are all distorted and fuzzed out, and we really caught them. Benny did a really good job with the noise, what do you call it? The dynamic range of his recording, so that everything's like, it sounds good. And these poor birds, you hear these birds chirping before. Those birds are not chirping afterwards.
No, sir. Is that one of the more rewarding things, putting in that work and seeing
killing
how cool
birds?
that is? Not killing birds, of course not.
That wasn't my fault.
We're animal lovers, but is that one of the more cool things, seeing all that hard work pay off and getting to look at something like that, let alone, hearing everything? Like, what's the most rewarding thing out of that job on the space side?
I mean, the absolutely most rewarding thing was being there with those guys and having somehow cultivated a lifestyle where I can make things like this happen. And just being there and not even doing anything. I was just, I was the one relaxed. Just, he's setting up over there, he's setting up over here. I'm just sort of staring at this rocket like, this is awesome. And of course, after the fact, it's cool to have something to share with people, and that's the focus, right?
Right.
But I don't know. It's like being on tour or something. It's just, you're out there and you're like, who gets to do this stuff, and we didn't get paid for that, but I was going to say, and getting paid, but that's,
you're getting
with
paid
the project
in your
we got
soul.
coming up with the camera stuff for my company. We are, that's paying. So
yeah, there you go. And you probably have like a ton of cool tour stories as well on the music side, with everything going on there. I've
got a lot of stories. I don't know if they're cool ones or not.
I guess my question there is, because, everybody says there's musicians and then there's rock stars, it's like the rock star persona. You're a musician, but have you had any rock star moments?
Oh, well, yeah.
Do tell.
This was one, I've got a lot of this is a story of failure, but it's interesting. Well, yeah, I guess so beginning of, was it 2019? I guess this was 2 years ago. There was this band, it was kind of like a super group thing that was put together, and the band was Steve Stevens on guitar and Matt Sorum,
oh wow,
Jr. on drums, and Geezer Butler on bass, you know, and then they were putting together a tour, and they needed they were considering taking out like a sideman. So like they basically had some songs they recorded, but you know, a lot of bands will do this where they'll, you know, you layer stuff for, I don't know, just people that don't know, you know,
Right.
like you layers, like Aerosmith will have a guy playing keyboards sort of on the side, and maybe they're on stage with the band, or maybe they're kind of hidden behind the curtain. You know, there's a lot of times, like, or Green Day started taking out Pat
Right.
Smear, I think, after a while, and kind of like just to thicken up the sound and have it match.
Oh, really?
the
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he started touring with them. I think he was touring with them when even like on American Idiot and stuff like that.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm a big Nirvana, Foo Fighters type guy. Green Day was probably my first love, though. Like that whole American Idiot, that Bullet in a Bible tour that they did out in England. I dressed up as Billy Joe Armstrong for Halloween like 3 years in a row. Like, he was my guy.
Awesome.
So that's interesting. I didn't know he did that.
I think it was Pat Smear. I mean, it was he, right? Or was he? It was after Nirvana, and it was. Yeah, because it wasn't Foo Fighters, because they have enough guys already. I want to say Pat Smear was with Green Day. I mean, unless I'm totally crazy about this. But I know Green Day had somebody, and I thought it was him. But anyway, so this band, so I ended up rehearsing with those guys for 2 weeks, about 2 weeks. And at the very end, they decided they just didn't want a side guy. It wasn't like, they didn't pick somebody else. They're just like, that's all right. We're just going to go. And they just wanted to keep it raw, you know?
Right.
But, it was very last minute. I had to learn all the songs really quick. And then next thing I know, I'm at rehearsal with, you know, all these guys, and it was neat. You know,
God.
You just sort of like shut up, stay in your corner, you know, stay out of the way and don't be a problem as much as possible. But you still have to, like, you know, anytime you're playing with like sort of players like that have played, you know, lots of stadiums, they've all been in big bands, and, you know, you have to bring a presence, you know, you can't be timid.
So who was the most intimidating guy that you ever played with?
Oh, that I ever played with?
Yeah.
As far as like a famous guy?
Like someone that, you know, you were on stage with or just performing with that you thought like, all right, I can't screw up here. Like there was just like an insecure part in your mind that said like, I got to impress this guy.
I wouldn't say it's intimidating in the sense of like playability, but it is, there's definitely a don't screw up in terms of like, you want to be professional and you want to like represent yourself well.
Right.
There was a gig, probably one of the most terrifying moments I had on stage was, I got asked last minute, this was a crazy story too, to play bass for a band that was, it was Vivian Campbell on guitar and Mark Schulman was playing drums. And I had one night to learn the entire set, and the show was going to be a sold out show at the House of Blues in LA. It was like this big, it was like a free, like an auction fundraising thing, I think.
Yeah.
And we had no rehearsal. I had to learn the songs overnight, and I'm not a good bass player. Like I can fake it, but like basically a friend of mine who was a friend of the band's, they had a bass player they were really unhappy with, and they were going to pull out of the gig. They were like, they didn't even want to do it. And she's like, oh, I got my friend, he's going to do it. And so I'm like, okay. She's like, go home, learn the stuff. I'm like, all right. So I learned all the music that night, and we did a couple of the guys came over, and we did a very quick acoustic rehearsal in my like roach infested Hollywood apartment, you know. And but then we only played one song together as a band, and that was at soundcheck at House of Blues. And Vivian came in, and he was so convinced that, and I'm going to preface this by saying Vivian is awesome. So I'm not, it's going to sound like I'm saying bad things, but I'm not. But he came in, and he was just, I think, in such a sour mood because he was like, he didn't want to be there. He was expecting this thing to fail. You got this jabroni who's showed up last minute to learn your set overnight, and like, how good is that possibly going to be, you know? And but I really killed myself to like not just learn the songs but memorize them, you know, so I'm not staring at a piece of paper, like, you know, because you got to be on stage, it's a show also, it's not just a recording, you know, you can't be staring at your notes or something.
Oh yeah.
And so we played one song at rehearsal. About halfway through that one song, because he hadn't said a word to me. He hadn't even looked at me. You know, poor guy just did not want to be there. And we get through this like thing, and about halfway through, I sort of see him turn, and like an eyebrow goes up, and he like that surprise, like, oh, this doesn't suck, you know?
Yeah.
And then as soon as we finished the song, he came over. He was really friendly, and it's been great ever since. You know,
Wow.
We only did a couple shows together, but he's always been very kind to me. And that night, yeah, definitely, you know, we're about to go on stage, and it's just like, oh Christ, what am I doing here? But it was great. It was total success. The show was great. Folks loved it. I remember one time I looked down while I'm playing, and I saw Mick Fleetwood standing in front, like looking at me while I'm playing. I'm like, you know, and I'd only been in LA a few years. I'm like, what the hell is this? You know?
Wow.
That was a good one.
I mean, that kind of comes back to, you know, having your own style, you know, having the confidence and courage to be like, all right, like this might suck, but we'll see. And then, you know, 50-50 chance. Sometimes it turns out great. Sometimes it doesn't, you know. But it's kind of like, and I kind of wanted to touch on this too, because I saw in the podcast that you did. This will be the last thing I ask you. I don't want to take too much of your time. But it was you guys were talking about David Blaine kind of, you know, manipulating choice. And, you know, what he did. Like there was an episode of like Jimmy Kimmel or Leno, whatever, that you saw, and he was doing a card trick. And it was almost as if like he was talking to you through screen. So,
well, he manipulated our choice through the screen. It was freakish. Yeah.
So, yeah, well, like, what's the whole story behind that? Like, what you guys were talking about, the conversation leading up to that, because that was very intriguing to me. That I kind of wanted to get around to.
Oh gosh, I don't even remember. Well, I guess what was your question though before? There was the first thing you said there about like sort of.
It was almost as if like he was like communicating with you, because you said that like you were just watching it and like you happened to pick the same card that he ended up showing.
Yeah, that's a thing that so some people have this like ability to read others, you know, and they have like this way. Like I there's a lot of people I'm very close to that are great at this. I'm terrible at this, where you can like read somebody and you can understand their motivations, and like when I look at people, it's just like a big gray area. You know, to me, I just see endless possibilities of neurons firing and no predictability whatsoever. But somebody else will be able to derive patterns of behavior, and they have a cognizance of human behavior, and they then in their mind it works together. When I look at, you know, a Mars rover, I see that. I see a whole holistic system where I just seem to have this understanding of how parts work together, and maybe ways that can be not maximized, but I can't think of the word right now, brains. But, you know, like ways you can better connect pathways, and like, you know, when you have a holistic view of something, you can that's basically, in my view, that's what I feel like is an understanding, when you sort of can see something from the outside and you can turn it in different directions, and there's no weird missing angles. When I look at people's motivations and their actions, I don't see that. To me, it's just a big gray mess. Same with like politics, or, you know, the possibilities are, you know, how could you know, but with things like working on a song, well, that's one of the reasons I love working with analog tape. You know, it limits your possibilities. You know, there's an end game. There's, you know, if you fill up those 16 tracks, you're done, you know, or whatever it is. When you're working with an instrument that's flying to another planet, there's everything that's an inclusive system.
Right.
You know, and there's ways to maximize the potential of that system. And so to me, somebody reaching through the screen and motivating somebody from afar, that's like, to me, that's just insane.
I mean, that is very, I know, like I remember listening to part of that episode thinking like, I'm definitely going to ask him about that. We'll see if he can answer the question, if I formulate it correctly. Yeah. But I always found that, I find the guy, you know, David Blaine, interesting as hell. He's insane. He's a crazy guy. But if there's anybody in this world that's a real if magic actually exists, you know what I mean? And it's not just all, you know, what it mostly is. It's got to be that guy. And I think I might have said on that podcast, I don't remember, but I remember thinking that like
it's almost like that guy transcended like what magic actually is, to the point where he had to like start doing other stuff because just, being the devil and screwing with people's heads just wasn't enough, Yeah, I don't know. That guy, there's an interesting interview with him one time where he was talking about, like, you actually see him get really emotional. He's talking about, I think he was talking about the one where he had to freeze himself, or he had to, he chose.
Wow. Yeah.
And like, and then he tried it once and he failed at it and he went back and did it again. And it was like this, there's something really interesting that drives that guy. And you see him like, he welled up. It was like the only time I've seen him almost exhibit human behavior.
Right.
And it was really interesting, and like, I don't know, but yeah, that was I still remember that like it was yesterday, man. That was a crazy thing.
I'm very curious to see what his next move is too, because what was it, the hot air balloon?
I don't know. I haven't followed that. I honestly don't follow that guy. It's too much for me.
It's too much.
I follow guys like Bill Burr, like his comedy. Anytime he does something that pops up, I can digest that. It's funny, it's awesome, it's hits you, but it's not going to like darken your soul for the next 2 weeks.
As long as you don't repeat anything he says, it might offend some people.
Man, well, he's so great.
That's the brilliance of Bill Burr, though.
Yeah, he's just like, who cares? It's trolls.
Yeah,
who cares? Like, that's a good point.
I mean, he wants people to come after him.
Well, NASA has trolls, man. It's so funny, like, and in weird places too. Like, you expect that on Facebook or something, but like, I'll go on LinkedIn, and NASA JPL will post something, and then some guy will be like, "Oh, how come there's no like?" Isn't LinkedIn supposed to be where like
professionals?
Yeah, like what? But and then you want to get fired up and join and like bash the troll, but that's like, really, are you helping society by troll bashing?
No.
It's just they're looking for a fight. They're looking to rile you up.
It's a sinister type attitude.
It's like the movie War Games. The only winning move is not to play.
That is very true, man. Well, I want to thank you so much for taking the last 40 minutes or so out of your day to talk to me. I'm glad we finally got this done. Sorry about the technical issues at the start. Again, we had a bit of a rain delay before, but we got the tarp off and we were rocking and rolling. But again, everything you got going on, man, it's very crazy to see what you're doing in a great way. Very inspiring. I was inspired enough to reach out to you to kind of pick your brain about what you do with your life. Obviously, two different things, two different entities, music and working, again, being a consultant for NASA, starting your own business again. It
sounds impressive when you put it all like that.
I'm promoting you, man. I'm building you up. So is there any place that
like
anybody should go to reach out to you when it comes to, regarding your business?
Yeah, well, the easiest way to find me is actually through my band name, because that's the easiest one to remember. It's just jasonachilles.com, and all the music is on Spotify as Jason Achilles and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But if you look that up, I guess if you say Jason Achilles and you type in, NASA or something like that, you can find my company as well. The company is called Zandef Deksit Incorporated. And that's also the website, zandefdeksit.com. Yeah, between those two sort of portals, I guess you can find, I'm on Instagram and stuff like that. But yeah, no, we're going to be doing, as far as shows with the band, we do a live stream concert every week. The next one will be usually, I don't know, we kind of set up on like Thursdays now afternoon. Mm-hmm. I don't know, that might change. And then the company, we're doing, we've got a test rocket launch scheduled for later this summer, where it's not going to go into orbit, but it'll be what they call a suborbital flight test. So We've got this selfie cam thing. We're going to fly in a rocket out in the Mojave Desert, or in Mojave, not the Mojave Desert. Yeah, that's a little farther. And that'll be probably September or October. We'll do the flight. We've got kids at Arizona State University helping us work on this thing, and a company called Honeybee Robotics, they've done a lot of work on the Perseverance rover and stuff like that. So really great team of people, and building hopefully a lunar/Mars payload for the next few years. We'll see how it comes together.
Well, go check out his stuff. Jason Achilles Mezilis. Again, remember, we're sponsored by, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor over at, Floyd Money Mayweather, Mayweather Boxing and Fitness in Scottsdale. Again, opening up mid-July, July 9th. They start construction. They will be opening up the brand new facility here in Scottsdale come July. Again, Jason, thanks so much. This was episode 366 of The O Show. Thanks for watching.